In Marvel Rivals, you have 3 different categories: DPS, support, and tank. Now when you look at the roster for each category, you might notice something, right? And no, I'm not talking about the huge amount of DPS in the game. I am talking about the amount of tanks, and more specifically, the amount of tanks that lack variety from each other. Before we start today's video, I would kindly remind you guys to go ahead and like and subscribe. We've been growing together exponentially over the last few days, and I want to keep this momentum going. There's no reason to stop now, is there? So again, if you guys could like and subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you guys know exactly when I upload. And yeah, let's just move on to the video. So I'm sure, as you guys know, that a lot of people have been having negative feelings towards tanking, and there have been a lot of videos and just a lot of topics in regards to why nobody wants to tank in the game. And a lot of people are giving their reasons, but I think the most common one that I see is the lack of tanks and numbers of tanks. And funny enough, this is something that I sort of been complaining about. I never made a specific video addressing that, but in a video that I did in the past about Emma, I did address that Marvel Rivals has a variety problem when it comes to tank, as well as the amount of tanks that are available to choose from. So let's go over how many tanks are in the game. There's Doctor Strange, Penny Parker, Angela, the Hulk, Venom, the Thing, Groot, Magneto, Captain America, Thor, and finally Emma Frost. So the funny part here is that 6 of these tanks actually kind of play the same, and not necessarily about the kits or anything like that, but more so the approach to their playstyle and how you use their specific kits to fit that certain playstyle. Now Penny Parker is sort of like an interesting thing where she's like the only tank that isn't within that sort of dive or rush down playstyle that a lot of these other tanks have. She's definitely more so a backline crowd control deal. However, now counting Penny, there are 7 tanks that have a commonality between them, and I want to know if you guys can guess this before I say it. I'll give you guys 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the common denominator that they share is the fact that they cannot solo a tank at all. I mean, sure you can, but it's going to be significantly harder than if you were solo tanking with a tank like, say Magneto or Doctor Strange, or even to some extent Groot. But here's the thing, these 7 tanks are designed with another tank in mind. These 7, I would categorize them as an off tank. Now you may be asking, what is an off tank? And before I describe what an off tank is, I think it's important to just say what I think a main tank is. So a main tank to me is somebody that has a strong fundamental in terms of spacing and protection for the team. You see this with characters like Magneto, Doctor Strange, and Emma Frost. Now I know a lot of people sort of go back and forth when it comes to what Emma Frost is as a tank, but I've seen enough and played enough of her to sort of know that she is more so on the main tank category because of the amount of pressure she puts on the front line alone, as well as her other abilities such as her damage negation and her barrier. So main tanks usually are at the forefront of everything. They have a clear defined set path that they should approach a match with, and this is where we get into off tanks. Remember that on the rail set defined path that I talked about main tanks? So off tanks derail from that path. They sort of go their own way. Usually they are characters that have higher mobility, not as much damage mitigation abilities, and just in general don't have a tool set that can support a team when they're on their own. But let's, kind of be real here. Off tanks are usually for people that don't want to main tank or like tanking in general. I don't want to say that off tankings are pretty much, DPS in disguise, but I mean, in a way, they kind of are. And I'm not saying that there's something bad with that, but to get back to the whole point of this video is that there are way too many off tanks than main tanks. And when you have a problem like that, it usually requires you to have 2 tanks almost at all times, because a lot of people don't necessarily pick main tanks. People will pick Angela, people will pick Thor, people will pick Hulk, people will pick the Thing, Venom, literally anyone else that doesn't have a proper, barrier for your team. And what that creates is a need that needs to be filled. And that need being, another tank to back them up. Now, you could pick 2 off tanks, that could work, but that very much changes the composition of what your team has to play. Way more significantly than if you just had 1 main tank, or even 2 main tanks like Doctor Strange and Magneto. I cannot tell you the amount of times I have seen people and heard people speak about how much they dislike it when they get a Thor, Angela, or Venom on their team. Specifically when the round starts, and that is the first character they lock in without necessarily knowing what the other players are going to go. And I guess that's just more so as a team diff communication thing, but that still works in tandem with the tanking experience in the game. A quick side note is I honestly don't know what to classify Groot. Groot has walls. He doesn't necessarily have shields, but at the same time, he works so funky. Like, I don't know what to make of him. You guys can let me know what you guys think about Groot. Like, is he like an off tank? Is he a main tank? Or is he just Groot? But moving on, this sort of leads me down to my next topic, and that is the fact that because there are 6 to 7 off tanks, there leaves little variety in terms of the category to play with. I usually play tank in Marvel Rivals as I did back in Overwatch. And let me tell you, I haven't felt bored with the tank role as much as I have in other seasons than this season today. Because when it comes to Marvel Rivals, the only archetypes of tanks that they have are usually either poke or dive. And there are significantly way more dive tanks than there are poke. Like, I think the only poke tank really is Magneto. I guess you could say Doctor Strange. But he's like a very weird situation where he's kind of like Reinhardt from Overwatch, but not fully committed. He does poke and he does a lot of damage, but I don't know. I guess I would call him like a hybrid poke. And Emma Frost is more so a brawler, a really good brawler. But the thing is, that's it. That's all the things you get with tank. You either go Emma Frost, who has her own playstyle, Magneto, who has that strong fundamental playstyle of what a main tank should be, and Doctor Strange, if I guess if you're feeling a little spicy. But aside from that, that's it. You don't have another tank that is committed on those fundamentals like Magneto. You don't have another brawler type tank like Emma Frost. And you don't have another Doctor Strange. Now you guys might be asking, well, wouldn't it be the same problem if there are, like 5 different brawlers and 5 different poke characters as opposed to the 6 different dive tanks? And that actually isn't my point. My point is that people that like playing poke, people that like playing brawl, or archetypes similar to those characters like Magneto, Emma, and Doctor Strange, they don't have much else to pick aside from that if they want to keep playing that playstyle. As opposed to dive, where it's like, oh, I love playing dive. I can pick the Thing, I can pick Thor, I can pick Angela, I can pick Captain America, I can pick Venom. They just have so much more to choose from that basket of playstyles of tank than all these other tanks do. Because hey, you want to play a tank that has strong fundamentals, especially like poking fundamentals, Magneto is your only choice. You want to play a good brawler tank that has good pressure, Emma Frost is your only choice. The thing is, when it comes to tank players and why they play tank, is they like tanking. I'm just as much as DPS players, when they play DPS, they like to DPS, which is why they're picking that role. And the same thing applies to healers. But when it comes to tank, there really isn't no variety in terms of what you can do with that role. Like, could you imagine if support was just filled with a bunch of off healers? Which, that's actually a topic I want to get to in another video, but let's move on. Say you love playing support. You love playing supports that have a fundamental moveset to keep your team alive, as well as an escape just in case, you get ambushed by like a Black Panther or something. You're not really necessarily looking at DPS. You're there to support your team and keep them alive, be it with your many utilities or simply just healing. Now, could you imagine if 99% of the support roster was just Ultron? That would not be good. Because when people play support, or when people play a certain role, they are going in to play characters that do and fulfill that role to the teeth. That's not to say that, the off healers and the off tanks don't exist. There are people that like that very niche playstyle, but that's what it is. That is a niche playstyle. It's like, say, for example, you go to a burger shop, right? And the only burgers that this place has are 2 different kinds of burgers. There's real meat burgers and you got vegan burgers. You're in the mood for a meat burger, which, that's what a de facto burger is. You go there, you want a burger, you look at the menu, there's only like 1 normal burger on the menu. And then you see like 50 different vegan burgers. That's kind of how it feels like with Mall Rivals, where there are people that enjoy that vegan burger, but when people go to a burger shop, they kind of go in there for a burger. Weird example. I know, just roll with it. But anyways, to go back, that's what kind of leads people to get bored of the role, because there's no variety. And I'm not even, this is just me talking about the fun aspect of tank. I'm not even talking about the logistical part of it. And when I mean logistical, I mean winning matches. So with how much variety there is in DPS, there's so much DPS. There's more DPS than there are tanks and supports combined. It's hard to sort of counter the DPS role because there's just so much in that category as opposed to something like tank. And like, I'm not saying that the tank roster needs to be the same size or even half the size of the DPS roster, even though I do still think that's part of the problem. There just isn't enough options in play styles and certain toolkits in order to sort of counteract what DPS has in terms of their variety and play styles. And that really makes, tanking very frustrating for a lot of people, to the point where they just don't like the role at all. Now, it's clear that Netease does have this favoritism to DPS because a lot of people do play the DPS category most and foremost. And that's something that's not going to change. Never at one point in this game's lifespan are you gonna get a role that is not DPS that has the higher roster pick in it? Anyways, to summarize this video, because I don't want to be rambling for too long like I already have, the lack of variety in tank is hurting the game. It's hurting the tanking experience. Not a lot of people want to tank because of that, or more so they're finding the role to be stale and unfun. I can personally tell you, as somebody who loves tanking, I've been feeling this fatigue when it comes to Mara Rivals specifically, because I myself like playing main tanks. But at the same time, I'm bored of picking Magneto, Strange, and Emma. But the thing is, that's all I got if I want to play that playstyle. And even then, when there's a problem going on during a match in which you're trying to figure out what you should do as a tank to better fit your team, especially when the enemy team is currently dominating you with their playstyle and their picks, it almost feels like you run short on answers just because of how little variety there are of tanks. So you essentially kind of feel like you got stuck in a rut with no answers in sight, because it's just a lot harder when your options are so limited. Anyways, that's it for today's video. This sort of was a topic that I always had in mind for the last few seasons. And I mean, I'm glad people are finally catching on or realizing that, hey, this is a problem. Because I'm sure, obviously, people can see and count, like they saw, yeah, there's like little tanks compared to the rest of the roster. But I don't think it finally clicked for people to notice that, like, oh yeah, you know what, little tanks are a problem up until this season. So hey, you know what, better late than never, you know. But yeah, thank you guys again for watching this video. We are growing together exponentially, so I want to thank everybody that subscribed and tuned in and give them a like, shared so much. I honestly don't know what to say. We are, I think, at 124 as of this video, and yeah, I mean, it's only up from here, so I appreciate it. If you guys can stick around, leave a like and subscribe, it would mean the world to me. Let me know what you guys think of the comments in regards to this topic, because, you know, you guys do provide a lot of insight and different POVs that I wouldn't have thought of myself. So it's always fun for me to go through and read them. But yeah, that'll do it for this video. So please take care, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.